We've got a grammar issue, world, no punctuation, colon, semicolon, comma. Let's take a look. Hopefully it won't be too hard without the just one word here. A conceptual artist and designer embraced by both the art world and the fashion world, Mary Ping was chosen to curate the exhibition front row. And then colon, everything like that. I don't really care about that. So it wouldn't be a colon and then a colon. And a conceptual artist embraced by both the art world and fashion world. That's dependent, so that's not an independent clause up front, so it's not a semicolon. Now the issue is it going to be no comma or a comma? So I've got a conceptual artist and designer, Mary Ping. That could be in a positive. But I do have this dependent clause, this past participle dependent clause in between, with prepositions embraced by both the art world and the fashion world. So the question is, do I need to, I don't have a comma here. Wait, let me just double check. Yes, I don't have a comma beforehand, so do I need a comma afterward? It's not that I would separate this dependent clause parenthetically. That's not the case. So do I separate the dependent clause up front with the main clause, that's Mary Ping was chosen to curate the exhibition? Or could this be in a positive where I say the name, a conceptual artist, Mary Ping, and that's restrictive, so I don't need to put Mary Ping separated by commas. But wait, if I did that, I'd have to put a comma here. So that's definitely not going to be, well, no, that wouldn't be the case anyway, because if it were in a positive, I would have no commas. It's restrictive, so I don't even need to think about that. A conceptual artist, so I'm caught between no comma and the comma case. So I'm going to actually come down to this. I mean, and a positive is two nouns that are the same thing or have the same meaning. There's more to that here. This is actually a dependent clause up front. A conceptual artist and designer embraced by both the art world and the fashion world. I'm going to go with our typical dependent clause up front, comma, independent clause structure and say, this is going to be D, world, comma. I think it's kind of pushing it to say with the dependent clause in between that we're looking at in a positive, which are two nouns next to each other. That's kind of overworking it or overthinking it. That's not exactly what's going on here. It is certainly a dependent clause or phrase up front, which would be separated by a comma from the main clause. Okay, grammar conventions, pray or comma, no comma, rather. And looks like I've got the semicolon with the rather comma or the comma rather semicolon. So usually in these cases, it's almost true, always true that the A and the B, the other non-semicolon answers are wrong. And I have to decide whether rather goes before or after. Let's see here. To humans, it does not appear that the golden orb weaver spider uses camouflage to capture its prey. Rather. Would I say it's prey rather? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say rather before the semicolon. So I don't think that's right. I think it's semicolon. Rather, so it's not using camouflage. Instead, or rather, the brightly colored arachnid seems to wait conspicuously in the center of its large circle web for insects to approach. I believe D is the answer here. And as is typical of this structure, it is certainly not the commas as the options. Why? Because we have an independent clause ahead of it, and the brightly colored arachnid waits conspicuously in the center of its web. It's an independent clause after it. So the commas would work out to be comma splices. We need the semicolon. And then the decision is rather goes before or after. In this case, it looks like it's after. Grammar convention again, Stanford, okay, one word with a comma, colon, semicolon, or nothing. Let's see. Okay, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded to 3 pioneers in the field of click chemistry, 2-time Nobel laureate, such and such, who coined the term click chemistry in 1998, Caroline Bertozzi, founder of the Bertozzi Group at Stanford. And then we're going to have the semicolon. This is a list of 3 or more where we have other punctuation, commas, in between, in the elements of the list. So I'm going to have that semicolon and Stanford, semicolon, and for the third item in the list. Here's where we're using the semicolons as super commas to set off the list of 3 or more elements. D is the correct answer. Another grammar convention question. I've got sole positing, sole comma, sole quotation, colon, quotation, semicolon, sole period, positing. So notice this is a little different. I've got the quotes in and out, so I'm not going to assume these are the same and I can eliminate the period and the semicolon. But let's take a look, okay? So in ancient Greece, an Epicurean was a follower of Epicurus, a philosopher whose belief revolved around the pursuit of pleasure. I like Epicurus. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body. So this is not a direct quote. There's no comma here. This is not Epicurus's quote. It's just an indirect quote. So as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul. So probably it's a quotation without the punctuation in the middle. Positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence. Well, positing would be a participle. It would not have a period there. That's not going to be an independent clause after. Could it be a semicolon, which could be after the quote because not indirect quote? That looks okay. But again, it's not an independent clause after. Positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence. Not an independent clause, not a semicolon. So could it be sole, comma, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence, or would it be a colon? So Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul, colon, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence. So this is more information helping us define or explain the quote that would become before the colon. That looks like it could be good. A participle could be. Why would it be one versus the other? Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of blah, 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 colon, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence. No, that's not really an explanation. I don't think that's an explanation or exactly an example. I think it's simply going to be comma and then present participle for a participle clause at the end. So Epicurus defined pleasure as this, that's my independent clause, comma, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence, dependent clause. I think that's the best answer, A for 33. Okay, standard English conventions. It's going to be materialism within a quote, punctuation in or out of the quotes with an and or no end. Okay, a bit going on here. In her analysis, Eden Wharton's The House of Mirth, scholar Candace Wade observes that the novel depicts the upper classes of New York society as consumed by the appetite of a soulless materialism. And an apt assessment given the House of Mirth is set in the Gilded Age, a period marked by rapid industrialization, economic greed, and widening wealth disparities. So I won't have the semicolon and. This is not a list of 3 or more elements that require sort of a semicolon. Let's check independent. In her analysis, Wade observes the novel depicts classes as consumed by, so that's an independent clause up to this point, right? By the appetites of soulless materialism. Would I then say, comma, an apt assessment given the House of Mirth is set in the Gilded Age? Period, set by. This is a dependent clause after. So I do need some kind of probably parenthetical or comma to set it off. I do not need and. Consumed by the appetites of soulless materialism and an apt assessment. It's not additive. That's not right. It's going to be consumed. So again, this is not a direct quote. There's no comma up here in front of the quote. So there's not going to be punctuation inside the quote. Well, I take that back. There has to be a comma here. So as consumed by the appetite of a soulless materialism, comma, And then we'd say our dependent clause, an apt assessment, given that the house of mirth is set in the Gilded Age. Yeah, there wouldn't be quote with no punctuation. We're setting off that dependent clause. It's extra information. It's non-restrictive. We would want to separate it by comma, and we separate the others by commas as well. C looks like it's the answer for 34.